I want to welcome our panel. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Starting here, I have Fred Bosey, and he was a rural mail carrier. And hold on a second. He retired in 1993. And then we have Nancy Anderson. Probably you all know her because she's a shining face there right now. And Nancy, so she isn't retired. And next comes Jim Conkle, who was the postmaster and he retired in 1992. And I should tell you that Eric Miller, who is our current postmaster, not only has a birthday party tonight, but he's new to us and he wished to defer to a person who'd been here in the past. But he was very helpful to me in getting started on having this panel and very supportive of our doing it. And then we have our last person, who is Tom Putzer. Before I get on to our member who's on the panel, and Tom retired in 1997. I don't know if I got that out of order, but anyway, 1997, just correct me please. And then George Miller, who's retired, but not from his present role, which is our archivist. And since he knows some things these people who are young don't know, he's going to share with you what he knows. So come on in, Arlen and Bonnie. I don't know whether you're going to have to sit on the floor or not, but come in anyway. And it's really great to see a big crowd. I hope we would have a big crowd because it's pretty special to know more about our post office, past and present. So, without further ado, I think we will start. Oh, I didn't wish to repeat for you latecomers that we have 2 heritage prints that are related to the post office, and they're over on that table. Heritage prints were done by the Art Center here. They're up on the wall, big prints, but these are little ones. And over here, we have a neat combination of things. They mostly were connected by a gentleman who was referred to as Count Moshi, who was a postal carrier in Ripon and made a rather unusual collection of stamps. They ended up in the hands of the Lambert family, who donated them to us. And they really are unusual, and I would urge any of you who want to see more of the collection. They're valuable. We can't really display them comfortably except to you one at a time. But this lady here and George both are involved in our archives and would be happy to one by one or 1 by 2 show them to you. So come back again if you're interested in the larger collection. And there are also a few just miscellaneous things. And Arden Gotsky gave us this mailbox, which was in the Davis Hotel. And when they converted it into apartments, he rescued it, I think, and gave it to us. So we get things from all over, and we're really pleased to have them and share them with you. So I'm going to start the panel with George because he's going to give you the ancient history. Will this move?
Yeah, there's a long cord. You can pull it. It's just
Thank you, Fred.
Okay.
And George is just going to tell us about the origins and bring it up.
Yeah, and very briefly, I want to just give enough background so that the comments of the panel will be in proper historical perspective. You know, the first settlement here in Ripon was down in the valley, and was called Ceresco, and it was began as a kind of an experimental commune. Didn't work as a settlement, although they did all right economically. And so they converted themselves into a village. Then that was in 1844 was when they started. And then they broke up the commune and established a village in about 1850. In other words, they lasted 6 years, which was really very good for an experiment of that kind. But it's almost as soon as they were settled here in 1844, they established a postal service. The head of the organization was a man by the name of Chase. His picture is behind there on the wall there in that big frame. And he had good political connections, so he was able to get a postmaster for that settlement. And it's in the town of Ripon now, of course, but at the time it was called the town of Ceresco. So the post office was referred to as Ceresco. The first postmaster didn't really have a post office, but we think he probably used his home as the post office. And that was not built until a little bit after the beginnings of the experiment. But the building is still there now, and it's a red brick building on the west side of Union Street, just to the north of Ceresco Park. And I'm sure most of you are familiar with that. One of the heritage prints that we have, which is here on this table, is a picture of that house and has a little story that goes with it. Then when Ripon was established in 1849, of course they wanted to move the post office for that town up to Ripon. And so there was a big political fight over just where the post office should be located. And obviously it was, having the post office would be a big advantage to the settlement. So it was an important fight, and they actually sent representatives to Washington to try to get it moved. And eventually it was moved up to Ripon in 1850. And in Ripon, of course, it has occupied many different buildings as post offices. The first building to be built as a post office was on the east side of the square somewhere. We don't know exactly where. And it lasted for a while, then it burned down. And then many of the other buildings used as post office burned down, sometimes taking all the mail with them. And they got off to a pretty good start. The problem really was with getting the mail to and out of Ripon, and Ceresco too, of course. And that was particularly true in the winter when there would be heavy snows. And the trains were frequently not able to get through. And so the postmaster would hire a man who would then walk back down the track in the direction from which the train was coming until he found the wreck. And then he would pick up the mail and bring it back to Ripon, and then leave mail on that, or find some other way to get the mail out of the town. The only thing of additional note, let's say, well, there was one other thing about the beginning. There is a tradition that the first mail carrier was in 1844, took all of the mail to Fond du Lac walking. Why he didn't have a horse or a horse and wagon, I have no idea, but he apparently did not. And they made, the bag that he used which to carry the mail was a pillowcase. And he carried the mail out to Fond du Lac and then brought the mail for Ceresco or Ripon back here in that pillowcase. The post office was of particular importance during the Civil War, partly because the information with respect to casualties would come in there first. And so whenever there had been a major engagement in which it was known that Wisconsin troops were involved, the post office stayed open 24 hours a day to be sure that people were notified if any of their family were involved in that. The post office was, for the longest time, was on the first floor of the old city building that used to be on that point of land, you know, at the southeast corner of the square, where the Forensic League is now operating. And that was where the city building had been for quite a long time. And that was, apparently those were very nice quarters for the post office over many years. Then in 1915, the city was notified by the federal government that they were going to get some money to build a new building. And okay, this was fine. But the city council said, thank you very much. There's a world war going on in Europe, and although we have no intention of getting into it, we think we ought to be paying some attention to defense. And so will you please use the money you're going to give to us and buy airplanes? And this gave the city national publicity. And we have many of the letters that were sent to the council here, and some of the newspaper articles that were written praising Ripon for its patriotism. And some of them are there on that table in case you would like to read them. Then after the war, of course, the government then said, we still will give you the money for your post office. And so let's see, the south half of the present building was built, and I think was opened in about 1924. And that, of course, brings us pretty much down to date, although, of course, that building was kind of doubled in size, and in the 1960s, late 1960s, 68.
68.
Yeah. So that gives you some of the background for that. And again, I would remind you that there are some things over there on the table that I'm sure you will be interested in. Pictures of where the post office has been, and just some of the very early mail that was sent out from the Ceresco post office and the early Ripon post office. And we'll ask you, whether they're under glass, so it'd be hard for you to get at them, but we'd ask you not to lift the glass because they're very delicate on there. But it's interesting, in the earliest letters from Ceresco, the date is 1845. There's no stamp on it, and I don't think there were stamps in 1845, at least not published by the United States. Anybody know?
You're
On
right.
the first,
You're right.
am I
Yeah,
right?
I think it's 1846, the first stamp.
40 cents for the first stamps. Apparently, postmasters could have their own stamps if they wanted, but these don't have anything other than just a pencil marking of the cost of the mail. And that's maybe a 5 in the corner, or a 10, or a 3. I think most mail about that time was 3 cents for a letter.
Yeah, in the early days, it was based on miles of travel.
Oh, was it? Yeah. Okay. Well, that's for the difference. But, and then one of the letters that's over there has a 3-cent stamp on it, and also instructions on the envelope of how they're to find Ripon.
Where, do you know where it was sent from?
I can't remember where it was sent from, but it said on the envelope that you have to get there by way of Fond du Lac. Okay, I guess that covers it.
Okay.
And I'll turn
And there
everything back
will
to
be a
you.
question period at the end, so if possible, unless it's critical, hold your questions until the end, so each person can have his one chance, for sure. And so, Jim, Congo, a retired postmaster. Will you follow George with how you see changes in your career? Were you something before a postmaster in the Postal Service?
Yes, I joined the Postal Service in 1959, and I was a carrier clerk, and then after could see I didn't want to do that, so I became a bulk mail technician in Menasha. And I was in Menasha that bulk mail technician position is very important because when I came to Ripon, it really came in handy, and I'll explain that a little bit later. Then I became postmaster, and I went to Elman for about 5 years, and came to Ripon in 1980 and retired in 92. The major changes that I've seen happened different times. Back in, say, 63, they started the zip code, which kind of started the revolution of how the mail was going to be sorted. And that made a big difference, and we all went through that, I know, and especially when they came out with the Zip Plus 4, and that really confused everybody and made it harder. But then, thank goodness, the machines took over, so we didn't have to be worrying about writing that on all our mail. The rates started to change major. I was surprised to see on one of those envelopes it was 3 cents back in 1859. And I had a manual I just brought along, domestic mail manual from 47, and the letter was 3 cents. So back in 71, the government changed the Postal Service to more of a private government agency. So it would have to basically eventually support itself. And that's when we all noticed all the rates started to change after 71, because the Postal Service had to pay its own way. At 3 cents, that was in 4 cents back in the 50s, probably was pretty well subsidized by the government, by our taxes. So that was a major change. The sorting did change quite a bit because of the zip code and because of the volume. Because the volume through those years was really growing. First-class mail was on the rise every year up until not too many years ago. And now it's on the downward spiral, and you know why that is, because of all the computers. So sorting was quite a major task. I don't know if Nancy was going to tell about that, but I just want to relate a little bit. She wasn't involved in that, but in Ripon and all the post offices around the country, when Christmas time would come around, it would be a zoo. Because they would put up, you maybe had 3-4 cases up, but they'd probably put up in Ripon probably another 15, 20 cases to sort the mail. And they're trying to have that many people there sorting the mail at one time. And tie it out, no matter how big the bundle was, you'd tie it out. If you had 10 letters, you tied it out to that particular city and send it on its way, either by the train or by truck or whatever they used. So when the sorting machines came into Oshkosh later, that really lightened the load for a lot of offices because most of the mail went there. And that made a big difference on the sortation of it. And we all know after the initial zip code and the sortation, then they came up with what we call DPS, with delivery point sequence mail. And the carriers will tell a little bit about that and how they had to handle it in sorting that. But basically, Ripon didn't have to do any of that sorting. It was done in Oshkosh. You just run it through the machine and put it in sequence the way each carrier walked, which is quite a task. And it's still going on today. Volumes. Let me just give you a little idea on volumes in Ripon. When I came here, we would probably send out a bulk mail. Most of it came from the Ripon printer, the college. We would probably maybe send 3 to 5 skid loads of mail a week. We'd have a straight back truck would pick up the mail and take it to Oshkosh. Well, through the years, Ripon printers added on, and things started to grow. Well, when I retired, I know it was And it still is from anywhere from 5 semis to 15, maybe even 20 semis a week going out. So there's a lot of volume of mail going out of Ripon. A lot of people maybe don't even know that, but there is. And the volume, of course, makes Ripon look good as far as revenue is concerned. When I came here, the revenue was roughly about under $1 million a year with all the businesses and all the first-class stamps and everything. When I retired, it was around 12 million and growing, and it still is. So Ripon Printers has made a big influx in the volume that Ripon handles here. And most of that mail is third-class bulk rate mail. There is some second-class that they ship out, but most of it's bulk third-class mail. And they ship it all over the country in all different ways now. They've got different ways than when I was in there. But that bulk mail, when it started to increase in Ripon, like I said before, I was a bulk mail clerk, so to me that was fun because that was right up my alley. I did that before, so bring it on. Let's do all we can. And talking to Doug Light, he was a little leery. Can we send out more mail? Was he be able to handle it? That's no problem. We'll just get a truck to your plant. He says, what? You get a truck to our plant? He says, yeah. Oh, that sounded great to him. He says, you mean I don't have to haul it back and forth to the post office? I says, no, not when you get enough volume. And then that happens. And it's been growing ever since.
So that's where you want to stop for now,
Yes,
Jim?
sure.
Okay, well, let's have Nancy Anderson next, because she is a current clerk. She's the only one here who's current, so let's hear what she has to say.
I don't mind, I love my job. Yes, when I came here, Jim was the boss. In fact, he called me in Princeton because Dave Reesup, who was a city carrier in town.
Hold the
Nancy,
mic closer,
hold it
please.
closer if you can. It's hard, you can hear it when you're successful.
Okay. Jim Conkle wasn't the boss when I came here. In fact, he called me after Dave Reesup told him, about me in Princeton. I had worked in Neshkoro first as the postmaster relief, in which I covered the post office there every Saturday. That was the only hours I got, was 4 hours every Saturday. And at first I hesitated about taking the job, but I thought, well, it's my foot in the door, it's a job in the post office. And I was there probably about a year when Reesup from Ripon here, who was a carrier, told me, Nancy, you should come work at Ripon, we need help, we need carriers. And I said, oh, I don't know if I could do that, all that walking. They didn't have Jeeps when I first started at the post office, just one that did relays, which relays were taking bags to the guys on foot. Well, I hesitated and I thought, well, and then Jim called and I said, well, let me think about it. And I thought, well, if I don't make it in Ripon, that means I'm out the door. If I can't handle all that carrying, then my job and career at the post office is over. But I came over here, told myself I'm going to give it a good month, and if that don't, if I can't make it in a month, then I'm done, But I huffed it. I got a lot of exercise, lost weight, and I liked it. I liked it after a while, The weather wasn't the greatest the first week, but after that, in fact, I did Tom Putzer's route, which was the hardest route. It was the hardest route. It had hills, it had dogs, it had everything.
Which route was that?
City 1, Tom
Oh,
Putzer's,
Tom.
yep, he had a hard route. Yeah, it rained every day my first week there. It was just like, oh, what am I doing? Yeah. He called me one day and I says, you can have your route back today. He just laughed and says, you're doing my route. And I go, that's nice, I think that was a day we were doing telephone book covers that everybody wanted, But we did it, we got it done. But right now, I switched over a while back, I think it was 10 years ago, I switched to Orrin Galo's job. Remember Orrin, good old Orrin. It's not an easy job, but it's a fun job. I like people, I like dealing with the public, and if I know what I'm talking about as far as what I'm, sending out, then I'm okay, with what I do. But it's, we've had a lot of changes though. In the last 5 years, things have changed drastically because of the competition and all that. But we do passports now, processing of passports, and then we just started doing pictures probably 6 months to a year ago. They're not our favorite job, but we do them. And then what else do we do? We wire money to Mexico and all other countries. Mexico is a pretty popular one because we get the seasonal workers from Fairwater, and they come in usually on Thursdays, but they didn't come in today, so I don't know if they'll be in there tomorrow. When I first started, timekeeping was done manually, but now we've changed and we now swipe when we come in and everything's done and recorded through the computers and downloaded into Milwaukee or Minnesota, actually. And they've made us do a lot more questions on security. When you come in, we will hit you with a lot of questions, which we're required to do. That's all part of our mystery shop. We do get mystery shopped every so often, in which if we don't get that 100, we're in big trouble, so we have to ask you all these security questions about what you have in your packages, and then we need to, give you the service that you're looking for. If you need something there in a hurry or guaranteed, we need to know that, so we give you that service. Then there's our priority, which is next. Then we need to ask you as far as if you need insurance, or if you need a confirmation of when it's been delivered. Those are things that we are required to ask. And then once you get that through your packages, then we have to offer you stamps or packaging supplies and things like that, which we will do. We kill you with questions, but we're just doing our jobs, and sometimes it's a reminder. I know a lot of times someone will say, oh yeah, I do need stamps, So that's all. If we get one of those out of a day, we've done our job. They also have a service, I don't know if some of you are aware of it, we have a lot of eBayers that come in and they do a lot of click and ship. That's something new where they can print a label from home, their home computer, and pay for the postage online. They then can drop it off at the post office without waiting in our line if there is one, or they can schedule a pickup for the next day by the carrier who, if they have it ready, the carrier can pick it up from their home and their address. They will come to the house and pick it up. And we still get credit for that because they're coming out of a 54971 zip code, so the post office does get credit for that. They also have a way of buying postage online. I know my neighbor did that, and she said it cost her like $1 to buy a couple of books of stamps. And that saves you a trip to the post office. We also have that stamps by mail. That's something we just sent out a mailing not long ago, where you can just fill it out, and it doesn't cost you any postage, and dump it in the mail. And we usually fill those in the next couple of days, and then they come back to you. That's all I have for now.
That's a lot.
To me, it's every day.
Thank you, Nancy. Well, now, it doesn't matter. Why don't, since you're next to Fred, do him next. And he was a rural carrier, correct?
Yes, that's right. I was a rural mail carrier, Route 3, Ripon, which went north of town. I started the post office as sub on March 1978, and I was working as pre-queen at the time, so I went on the night shift so I could work days at the post office. And the post office had a short route, which now has become Route 4. So they have 4 rural routes in Ripon plus your city routes. And I run that short route until I became a carrier in December of '83. Actually, things haven't changed a lot since I've been out. I stopped in, and I was told when I quit that I was going to have to sort instead of up and down the cases, which I did. I was going to put and go around my case. Well, I didn't get it done, so that whoever came in took my job. They had to go around it on the cases. And also now they have a scanner that when they deliver their packages, that they have to scan the packages as they deliver them so that they know that they're delivered. Also, like they stated there, the mail comes from Oshkosh, pre-sorted. You could put the box in your car and go out, but normally most of it's cased. And I will say, being a rural mail carrier, I enjoyed going out into the country and meeting the people and seeing the crops grow, whenever I could look around anyway. Route 3 was 58 miles long. And, well, just for your information, it delivers all the way to what is now 91 between Waka and Berlin. And then I went up 91 and came back and worked my way back in and Cora Road in that way in, and then I had a city, end of the city route, which was Union Street, and up that way there. One of the things that I remember was getting the flat tire. One day I was out south of Rush Lake and I ran over a hitch pin with the front wheels, which I didn't see. And the next thing I knew, it went into my back tire. And I've never seen that happen in my life yet. But it did for me anyway, but I had a flat tire that day and had to fix it. We had our own problems with bees and cold weather and with our window open, but it's something I enjoyed as rural care and feel it was one of my best jobs that I've had. And I retired on October 1st, 1993, and enjoyed every bit of it.
Thank you, Brad. And now, last but not least, city carrier retired. Tom.
We're always last.
Tom Petzer.
I started at the post office in 1967 as a sub-clerk carrier, which meant I had to do clerk work and carry the mail and learn all the routes in town and deliver it on all the routes when the carriers had a day off, which was one day a week. So one day I was on the north end and next day I was on the south end or whatever. And at that time when I started, parcel post was a big thing. And I spent most of the morning running parcel post for the truck when we had a lot of business on Main Street, dress shops and clothing stores and hardware stores, paint stores. We spent probably a good 2 hours
Jewelry stores.
just and oh yes, jewelry stores took all the big loads of watches and diamonds.
Those were registered?
Oh, yeah. I think you got them all. Yeah, we did a lot of that. I was a sub clerk carrier for 11 years before I finally got a regular route. I was on City Route 1, which consisted of everything from State Street to Tabbert and Wawa and Ripon, the whole west side of town. Ceresco, where I grew up, went to school, so I knew all the people down there. I was on that route for 19 years. Loved the people. Had chances to get off of it, but I never did. But when I first started, we had in the morning, we had to pick up the drop boxes in town where people could, they don't have them anymore, where people could mail letters. We had to pick up on Main Street and up by the college. And I can remember one morning by the college, because we started at 5:45. And I got there and reached in the box, of course it was dark, and somebody had thrown some eggs in there. So I had a handful of busted fresh eggs. They were fresh. So they had some mail to wipe off when I got back to the post office. And at night we had to pick up all the boxes around town, which there was probably about 15 at that time. There was 3 on Main Street, and 1 by the hospital, and out on Vermont Street, and way down on Union Street. Then bring that mail back into the Ripon post office. Separate out of town and in town, because at that time mail was sorted in Ripon instead of Oshkosh. They'd bundle up the mail for out of town and they'd send that out, and the in-town mail stayed and was sorted to the carriers in the morning. Be the carrier. At that time we had to pull our own mail in case everything. Now it comes in, like Jim said, DPS, direct, what's it called?
Delivery point sequence.
Delivery point sequence. Starts out right in a tray from your first delivery to your last stop. They have it in trays. Now, that started about 2 years before I retired. Otherwise, during that time, everything stayed pretty much the same. That's about all I have.
Well, I'm sure there are questions from people. I'm going to start off with a question. I know that Ruth, who was my carrier, rural carrier, ended up buying a car that had a right-hand drive so that she could get to the mailboxes more easily. Has anyone else done this in Ripon? And she isn't doing it. Well, she's doing it in another rural area.
She's doing another route in Ripon. She's doing Tuba Dan's route.
Okay.
When Tuba retired, there was a big change in routes. She took a different route, and then Kia did your route, and just shifted it all around. It was quite a mess, because they all of a sudden were new employees, and it was pretty hard. There was a lot of, frustration, but they got through it, and they're getting better at it. Hopefully things are getting back, to normal for the roads.
I also know, you said you just liked it, so you stayed here. I know that Nancy left us briefly and decided she preferred to be here. Were there any things you could share about why you chose to come back here?
I just went on a detail job to Fond du Lac. You
Yes.
talk about Fond du Lac? Yeah, it was a temporary thing. I knew that, but at the time I just kind of needed something different in my life. So I went over to Fond du Lac, and that was 10 times the size of Ripon. But it was kind of like Ripon, but they just had instead of 5 routes, they had 40 routes, and instead of, 3 rural routes, they had 10. It's like, they're just multi-sized, And it was okay. I kind of had to be the boss of the window clerks there, and instead of having 1 or 2, they had 4 and 5. And I was amazed, they had lines out the door all the time. It's like, come on, girls, hurry up, but there was lines constantly. And it was quite interesting. I knew it was temporary, so I did that with that in mind, But I couldn't wait to come back and, do it my way, But it was interesting over there.
And I would have to comment right now that this is just a wonderful post office to go into. Everybody is helpful in my experience, and when the road was all torn up, people would carry, when I came back from a vacation, a big box out of my car for me. All sorts of just nice, friendly things that happened. How about the rest of you? You must have questions about your service. Yes, ma'am?
I've got one to ask Dr. Miller. When I worked at the Little White Schoolhouse, there was always, they wanted to know about the story, the fight between the Sorescos keeping the mail and Ripon keeping the mail. It seemed like there was a story that went that described it or something. I didn't know that story. Can you?
Well,
The conflict between Soresco
Yeah.
and Ripon.
How because they said, well, there was literally a fight over it.
Yes, there would be, because I think Soresco, maybe let's say, had a Democratic postmaster or something of the sort, and now Ripon had a Republic, or what it was, Whig postmaster at the time, and so it was, it was not just a matter of location, it was a matter of politics. And it just happened that at the time that the change was made, that let's say the party of the Ripon group, which let's say was Whig, I'm not sure about that, I'm guessing, awarded the postmaster job to the Ripon person. And then when they came time to make the move, the people of Soresco formed a funeral procession and brought all of the equipment of the post office up to Ripon, making kind of a joke out of it.
Yeah. Well, I never knew the details, but that's why I was questioning.
Anyone else have a question? Yes.
Clarence?
In the town that I was from, the party in power had the postmaster, and if the next party won, then the person that was in town took the rural route. And it was like the second best.
Is that true in Ripon, Jim?
That went out back in about 1972. The political end of postmaster appointees is stopped. 72. I think it was 72.
Right after 71.
Right after.
Reorganization in 71.
Right. Right. That's how I was able to get a job, just by merit. You applied for the position and on merit, you were awarded it. Before it was, yeah, you had to belong to that party and you had to work that party to get that position prior to that, somehow. I got a little story. I see Ralph is here. Were you at the Valley Bank then?
Oh, am
All the time?
I? All the time.
Well, this happened with the Valley Bank. Well, Ralph would appreciate this. I was making the nightly deposit. We did it on the telephone because Postal Service had a great way, but during the night, they would draw it right out of the bank already by the time, before the bank even picked up the deposit, they would have it out of there already. Well, I had called in this deposit and apparently I must have been busy or not doing my job right, and they gave me the verification number and I just jotted it down, but I didn't verify it, I guess. Well, the next morning, John Gear, I think it was, called me up and said, "Say, you drew out too much money out of the bank. You got $70,000 overdraft." I said, "What?" But you know, in a small town like that, he said, we'll just carry you until you got it made up. Isn't that neat? I thought that was special. It made my job a lot easier.
Yes, Ken.
Did you ever deliver twice a day in Christmas, during Christmas?
Yes. Yes. I remember
Did you
that.
cover that?
I don't know if Ripon had that or not. I know in Menasha they had twice a day delivery on Main Street.
On Main Street in Ripon they did. After I had started. Before I started, they used to have two deliveries a day.
Yeah, yeah,
And on
yes.
Main Street they did.
Was that
At
just
Christmas time, we put on extra help. We had a lot of parcel posts at that time, and we even borrowed a truck from the ROTC at Ripon College because it was a government vehicle that we could use to peddle parcel posts. We used to run parcel posts till 5:30 at night sometimes at Christmas time, daily, even on Sundays at times. That's all changed, because at that time, there was a lot of Christmas cards being mailed. We had extra help out in the lobby in the post office, where people could bring in their mail and had it separated in town and out of town. And they asked all the people if they were sending out mail to do it that way, to bundle the in and out of town mail.
Ken, is the behavior, or was it once, the behavior of postal employees dependent on the state you lived in? Because I remember as a child that we got, in the last 2 weeks before Christmas, we got one mail on Sunday.
I couldn't answer that. I'm not sure.
We did here in Ripon, when the mail was real heavy,
You did
they'd pull a few employees in on a Sunday at Christmas
But
time,
that-
maybe just the one Sunday before Christmas,
Right. Yeah.
depending what day of the week Christmas fell on.
Right, right, but that would have been up to you, I mean, up to the local one, the local post office, whether they would do it or not.
To the local post office, I
Right.
believe, depending on the volume of mail that they
Yeah.
had coming in.
Yeah. But it wouldn't happen now.
Not now. They don't have the Christmas mail today that they did.
No, but it wouldn't
20
happen
years
for other
ago.
reasons, I'm
No,
quite sure.
I don't think so.
They still do parcels though, on Sunday, a couple
You do?
Sundays before Christmas.
Oh.
Right, they still bring them in and they still take off the extra volume. That's only the month of December, right before Christmas, depending where it fell. Sometimes it'll be 2 Sundays, sometimes it'll be 3, depending on the volume. They do deliver on,
Okay.
just to keep the volume down for that Monday when it really comes in.
I can remember in the 40s and 50s here in Ripon, we had two times of having the mail delivered twice in Ripon, morning and afternoon. They still, how long did they do that?
I started
When I started.
I started in '59, and the only thing that got twice was Main Street. Never any place else, no, that I ever heard of. back then. And I don't remember anybody talking about it that much in 59, so probably stopped sometime before that, I would guess.
She may be talking about mail in the morning and then parcels later in the day?
No, the
twice
mailman
a
came
day
around, he had
delivery.
shorter routes, he
Yes.
came in the morning
Yes.
and he came in the afternoon.
Right,
Right.
we used to get
Yep.
mail twice a day, much less mail, in the 40s.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's hard to even comprehend that because mail back then was so much less than it was in, say, the 70s and 80s. Mail volume was increasing tremendously during that time. We were averaging Ripon 3 to 5% every year increase.
Do you think that was
Volume.
just during the war?
No, that was afterwards,
No.
I moved to Ripon in 45 and I can remember that.
Tom, was Art Lou there when you were there?
Yes, he was
Art
our
Lou was there
mailman.
Okay,
when I
because
started.
he
yeah.
was on my route on Woodside, and he came twice a day.
That's, see, I live
Yeah,
right near Audrey.
absolutely.
The value of the mail was
Yeah,
was
well,
a lot
maybe,
less than they
yeah,
could do
but
it.
maybe some got it in the morning, there were people, I mean, he did the same route, but maybe not everybody got it morning and afternoon, you know. But he came by twice a day.
Yep.
Well, when I started in 67, there was no way we could have done the
Yeah.
route
Yeah.
twice.
Well, it
You
probably
know, we
wasn't
could do it
anywhere
again, done
near
one
as
day.
big.
Other questions?
During World War II, we had something known as V-mail.
Yeah.
And we would write the letter on a sheet of paper, maybe this size, and then it would go to the
Yep.
Army Post Office, and it would be photographed, microfilmed, and then they would send a roll of film overseas. They'd fly it over to this country or back overseas, and then it would be reproduced on a much smaller scale. Now, I'm just wondering if they have something like that, or a lot even better today for getting mail to the troops.
No,
No.
nothing that I know of. The only thing I know is an APO address, and of course it's flowing there.
Yeah.
Because of that address, they know where it goes. APO or an FPO,
I suppose.
that's about it.
None of you experienced mail like that, receiving it? My goodness, we are older than
I remember that meeting.
you. You do?
Yes,
Okay.
because we had friends that were
Service?
overseas in World War II.
Yes,
And
that's right.
I can remember my parents getting mail like that.
I have a general question to ask of anybody, it could be Nancy. Sometimes you seem to be back to having more clerks, Nancy, than you had for a while. We went through a period when you all seemed to be alone when you were a clerk. And now it's rare that I go in that there aren't two of you there. Sometimes one is behind the scenes and comes out. But what has changed? Is that the volume in Ripon?
Yes, somewhat. They tried 2 clerks on all the time. We did it for probably 6 months until there'd be a slow time during the day, like between 10 and 12, there'd be a slow time. So there'd be 2 of us sitting there looking at each other going, oh, this is boring, you know. And then we'd have all the work caught up. So then they put it again, and now I'm kind of alone. Mondays they stay till like 9:30, 10 o'clock, depending how busy I am at the window. Then I'm usually alone from like 10 until 1. So that's usually our slower time, even though at lunchtime we have people coming in doing their, rush hour,
So
lunch hour.
people are working part-time, are they?
Right,
To fill
that's
ones?
right. They do a split shift. They come in at 6, and they stay till like 9:30, 10 o'clock, and then they come back at 1 till 5:30.
Okay.
That's pretty much like, they're called part-time flexibles, that's their job. I did that for 14 years. 6 days a week, you didn't know if you got 2 hours or 10 hours, it just
Oh,
depended
my.
where you were needed, whatever you had to do. The girls have got a new schedule right now, they're working, they've got it figured out, they're doing like 4 days, where they do a split shift the 4 days, and then they get time off in between unless somebody would call in sick or something, then they'd be called in, but yeah, that's been working pretty good so far. We've done that for a month or so now, but yeah, that's their split shift.
And one other question, What about volume of mail different days of the week? Is there a difference?
Mondays are our worst day. Monday's really bad. When I've heard rumors of stopping Saturday delivery, that would be horrifying, because right now it's, Mondays are bad, we're just having Sunday off. And Mondays we get triple the parcels and letters. It's just, I do the parcels and there's tons of them. I can hardly get them all done, but then on Tuesday it's like a different day. It's like I get half the amount, you know. Just depends on the season and the holidays. And the college kids have brought in a lot of parcels, you know, when they first started up again. That was really busy. And Mondays are bad. Mondays are our worst day, I would say. And then the first of the month it usually picks up. We get a lot more. And the DPS, instead of 2 or 3 trays a day, carriers will get 4 and 5 trays that go directly to their routes. And that's, you know, extra work for them, but it's already sorted. That's the part. Mondays are bad.
I'm just thinking on those computers, I understood that they run everything through the computer now at the window. They can use that to monitor, and they can check anytime on what kind of volume is going on, what time of the day. So they can regulate the window hours from that. And they will do that. If there's not enough business, they're gonna try and cut back hours. Maybe not in the office, but somebody up the ladder will try and cut it back because it says they don't have enough business going on there.
I have a question that
Gary.
none of you may be able to answer. I'm wondering if the United States Postal Service is still exclusively an institution of the United States government, because I remember there was some political sort of brouhaha about it many years ago, and then I noticed, you know, now they, you know, USPS sponsors a bicycle racing team, and I'm sitting here thinking, well, how much of my 39 cents is going to pay for this?
I thought that too.
You know, all that sort of thing, and I know they do other kinds of advertising, which when I was a child, you know, you never saw. So has there been some kind of change in the?
No, there hasn't. And I think that advertising would depend on the Postmaster General. If he wants to do something like that, because it is private technically, but it's a government agency. It's not a complete private agency at all. It's still a government agency, but it's not, they're on their own, so to speak. And that hasn't changed. There's talk about revamping some things and giving some more freedom. There's a bill before Congress, but I don't know if that'll get passed or not.
And then along with that, did you notice any big difference? Like when I was a child, there wasn't any UPS or FedEx or anything like that. Has that had a significant impact on your?
It would, I guess, yeah, you'd have to say major. You just try and picture all the UPS trucks running around, and now you give that all back to the Postal Service. That would be quite an undertaking. The Postal Service would have to handle that all. It's a major impact. It really drove down the parcels there. I don't know the years, but it drew them down quite heavily. But they have picked up in the last year or so. Parcel business has picked up, and UPS, if they don't want to go someplace, they'll even come to the post office and mail it. They have done that.
What UPS was just getting started a few years after I started working at the post office, and we had large volumes of parcel post at that time. And UPS was new, and UPS carriers would come in the post office and want to know where somebody lived on Route 2 Ripon, and at that time, the window clerks, I don't know if a lot of you remember Johnny Aritzko and Mickey Grisey.
Yeah.
They didn't want to tell them. That's your job. You find it like our guys have to. We didn't give them any help.
Now, don't you have a Privacy Act? I was doing something for the hospital, and I stopped at a post office, and I was trying to get to a certain spot. They said, we can't tell you. But we will tell you it's on this road.
That's about it, yeah. You can't divulge somebody's address. If the person has an address and a name and address and you want to know where it is, then you can tell them. That's not a problem, but If they don't have an address, no. Only the sheriff's department or police officer or court person can come in and get that, but they usually have an order with them. Is that still the same?
Still the same. You give us a name, we can't give you an address. You give us an address, we'll give you directions if we know how to get there. Sometimes it's rural routes, and I don't know all my rural routes, but we'll ask somebody to help you.
Well, how are we doing? Have you finished general questions? Oh, excuse me, Betty.
This is interesting. When did you, when was the last baby chick delivery? Do any of you remember
Fred, you must have
delivering
delivered
baby chicks?
didn't
No,
you?
no, I never did.
I remember them coming in the post office.
I remember
They
when
still
I was
come,
working
they
there.
still come.
They still come.
We
come.
could. We try to wait till at least after 6.
And
You
bees
know,
also.
We wait till after 6 and then we call.
Honeybees.
Oh, good.
Crickets, we get crickets too.
Tony Waters used to have bees, and he used to get
Sure.
bees, queen bees.
Beetle bugs, darwins.
Easiest to handle when they're all in the cage, but sometimes they're not.
Oh.
Bees on the outside.
More questions? Yes.
You're talking about beetles and crickets? What?
Sure, people get them for like, they go to a pet store. We did for the pet store, crickets. When the Little Rascals had their store, crickets would come in and we deliver them to them. Beetles, we had a customer who used them in his garden. He'd spread them. Every spring, he'd come in with quite a few boxes. A lot of times Carrie didn't want, have them in their vehicle, so we'd call the customer and he'd gladly come for them. But we still have chicks. That is fun. That's in the spring. We call them and they come gladly because they need to get them under, give them food and lamb.
Yes.
Are mail carriers above average healthy from all the walking?
That's our Tom.
Growing up there. You're gonna live forever.
Tom had a tough route. He had the hills. He walked a lot of hills.
Uh-huh.
He did it for a lot of years. Ask him what funny thing.
Well, I've had a
Above average
I've had a knee replacement 5 years ago, and I'm a candidate for another one. But otherwise, yes. One of your
Payments aren't
questions
the
is,
best.
there aren't many retired mail carriers still alive in Ripon. I should say that.
It seems like once they stop walking, that's not helping.
Yeah,
It kind of shuts them down. It's like,
In fact, I think I'm the only one. It was between 15 and 17 miles. I had everything from State Street
Every
to,
day. That's every day.
I don't know how I did it, but I did it, and I liked it.
How many miles you walked?
15 to, I thought it was close to 18 sometimes. 15 to
17. That's why I have a knee replacement.
Maybe they use those little trucks.
Oh, sure.
They're using trucks now.
We didn't have trucks. We walked the whole way.
That didn't start very long ago.
Some areas it has, it depends. I myself don't see a lot of value in some of them on certain areas, but that's a personal choice that the postmaster makes and the carriers, they get together when it's best to have one or when you don't need one or when you do.
I think the one I see goes out and goes up your Union, isn't it? I think so.
Well, that's hard. It's not a walking person.
Oh?
No.
No, the Jeep.
No,
No.
they drive to the
No,
corner
their
and
own
then walk around
cars,
and
their
walk.
own
and-
cars.
Got about 4 vehicles now.
Right.
We had one.
And then they get out and walk a few houses and then they go back, yeah.
Not
Stay
down where
warm.
I am.
This may be a difficult question because when you ask your opinion, could you make a couple of relative comparisons that compared to 1940, we can transfer so much mail so fast, or what's the amount of time it takes to get a letter to San Francisco or back, and that type of thing. Can you give us some statistics as how much improvement has been made in the postal service?
I can't really relate back to back in the 40s. I can think back as when I started. They always had that goal of everything in 3 days, and overnight was within a certain area was overnight, the state or surrounding sectional centers, which we called, and then 2-day was in between. But that was always a goal. They didn't always make it, but that was the goal when they used the airplanes to fly. When it was by train, I don't really remember how many days it would take to get trains across the country and get that mail to, say, California. Now
But
it's
first
every-
class right now, we could say 3 days to get you any place in the United States and Hawaii.
Yes, yeah, Alaska.
And
That's
when
the
I was-
goal.
When I was in California, I could mail a letter by 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and my wife in Honolulu would get it the next morning. I was impressed.
If flights are right, if you catch the right flights, it'll happen.
The other big difference is you had airmail service and ground service.
Yeah.
And
That's a
see,
good
and so
point, yes.
for doubling your price, you could get airmail, because it usually
Right.
was
That's
3
right.
cents for the regular first class and 6 cents for airmail for a long time.
Right, that was.
So
a
you
big
had the
difference.
choice up there, but now we don't have the choice.
No, it's all, most of it
It's
is
all
airlift.
that or priority or express, but, you know,
Mhm.
but that's way more expensive.
But I can tell you that when my sister moved from Aberdeen, Washington to Washington DC, and I think it was 1933, it took five days before my folks got a letter from her.
Probably by train.
Yeah.
By train.
Yeah.
Well, shall we adjourn the formal part and you all can talk individually with our wonderful panel? I'm delighted with your presentation. You've added a lot to the Historical Society's knowledge about our local post office, and that's important to us. And probably we should have you all back in another 5 years. Any more changes?
Yeah.
I thought you were gonna say 25.
After his knee operation.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you.